Picture yourself settling into a comfortable space as we embark on a gentle journey back through time, to a world that existed thousands of years before our modern conveniences. Ancient Egypt, a civilization that flourished along the banks of the mighty Nile River for over 3 millennia, was a place where life moved to rhythms entirely different from our own. The year is around 1500 BCE, during the height of the New Kingdom period. The sun rises each morning over a landscape that stretches endlessly across golden sands, punctuated by the green ribbon of fertile land that follows the Nile's meandering course. This is a world without refrigeration, without global trade networks bringing exotic spices and fresh produce from distant lands, without the agricultural techniques that we take for granted today. In this ancient realm, the concept of food was fundamentally different from what we know. There were no supermarkets filled with perfectly preserved fruits and vegetables, no restaurants offering cuisines from around the world, no convenience stores stocked with processed snacks. Instead, sustenance was tied directly to the natural cycles of the earth, the annual flooding of the Nile, and the limited resources that could be grown, hunted, or gathered within the immediate vicinity. The ancient Egyptians lived in a society where the majority of the population were farmers, laborers, and craftspeople who worked with their hands from sunrise to sunset. Their daily lives revolved around the basic necessities of survival, securing enough food to eat, finding adequate shelter, and fulfilling their roles within the complex social hierarchy that defined Egyptian civilization. Imagine the landscape of ancient Egypt unfolding before you like a vast tapestry woven from earth and sky. The Nile River flows northward through the desert, its waters carrying life-giving silt that transforms the narrow strips of land along its banks into fertile agricultural zones. Beyond these green oases, the harsh desert stretches endlessly, a reminder of how precious and precarious life could be in this environment. The climate was hot and dry for most of the year, with temperatures that could soar well above what we might consider comfortable. During the summer months, the sun beat down relentlessly, making food preservation a constant challenge. Without modern cooling systems or chemical preservatives, everything had to be consumed quickly after preparation, or carefully dried, salted, or fermented to prevent spoilage. In the villages and towns scattered along the Nile, daily life began before dawn. Families would rise as the eastern horizon began to lighten, preparing for another day of labor under the Egyptian sun. The morning air carried the sense of cooking fires being lit, the sound of grinding stones as grain was processed into flour, and the gentle lowing of cattle being led to pasture. The social structure of ancient Egypt was rigidly hierarchical, with the pharaoh at the apex, followed by nobles, priests, scribes, craftspeople, farmers, and slaves. Each level of society had access to different types and qualities of food, creating a complex web of dietary distinctions that reflected one's place in the social order. For the wealthy elite, meals might include a variety of meats, fish, fruits, and vegetables, prepared by skilled cooks and served on fine pottery or precious metal dishes. However, even these privileged individuals were limited by the agricultural and technological constraints of their time. There were no exotic spices from distant continents, no out-of-season produce artificially cultivated in controlled environments, no processed foods designed for convenience or long-term storage. The vast majority of the population, however, lived much more simply. Their diet consisted primarily of bread, beer, onions, garlic, and whatever other basic foods they could afford or grow themselves. Meat was a luxury reserved for special occasions or religious festivals, and variety in the diet was largely dependent on the seasons and the success of local harvests. As we begin to immerse ourselves in this ancient world, let yourself feel the weight of these realities settling around you like a comfortable blanket. The pace of life was slower, more deliberate, more connected to the natural rhythms of the earth. People ate when food was available, fasted when it was scarce, and found satisfaction in simple, basic sustenance that nourished the body without overwhelming the senses. The kitchen areas of ancient Egyptian homes were simple affairs, usually consisting of an outdoor courtyard with a fire pit, some clay pots for cooking and storage, grinding stones for processing grain, and basic tools made from wood, stone, or simple metals. There were no elaborate cooking equipment, no complex recipes passed down through generations of professional chefs, no sophisticated techniques for enhancing flavors or creating elaborate presentations. Cooking was primarily the domain of women, though men might participate in certain activities like brewing beer or preparing meat for festivals. The process was labor-intensive and time-consuming, requiring careful attention to prevent food from burning or spoiling in the intense heat. Water was precious and had to be carefully managed. The Nile provided the primary source, but it had to be transported to homes and settlements, stored in large clay jars, and used sparingly for cooking, cleaning, and drinking. During the dry season, when the river level was low, water conservation became even more critical. The concept of freshness was fundamentally different in this ancient world. Without modern transportation networks, most food was produced and consumed locally. Fish came from the Nile or nearby ponds, vegetables were grown in small plots irrigated with river water, and grains were harvested from fields that flooded annually with the Nile's life-giving waters. Preservation techniques were essential for survival, especially during lean periods or when traveling. Meat was often dried in the sun or preserved with salt. Fish were cleaned, salted, and hung to dry. Fruits and vegetables were dried, pickled, or fermented. These methods, while effective for preventing spoilage, often resulted in foods that were tough, salty, or strongly flavored in ways that might seem unpalatable to modern tastes. As you settle deeper into this contemplation of ancient Egyptian life, let your breathing slow and deepen. Feel yourself becoming more and more relaxed as you imagine this distant world where life moved at a gentler pace, where people were more directly connected to their sources of sustenance, and where the simple act of eating was tied to the fundamental rhythms of nature and survival. The sounds of this ancient world begin to fade into a peaceful background hum, the distant splash of the Nile against its banks, the soft rustle of palm fronds in the evening breeze, the quiet conversations of families gathering for their evening meal. These gentle sounds create a soothing atmosphere that invites deeper relaxation and peaceful contemplation. As our journey through time continues, we find ourselves approaching the heart of ancient Egyptian domestic life, where the daily rituals of food preparation and consumption took place. Let yourself become increasingly relaxed as we explore these intimate spaces where ordinary people went about the essential business of nourishing themselves and their families. Imagine walking slowly through a typical Egyptian village as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon. The heat of the day is gradually giving way to the cooler temperatures of evening, and families are beginning to gather for their primary meal of the day. The narrow streets between mud brick houses are filled with the gentle sounds of daily life winding down, children playing quietly in doorways, women calling to neighbors, the soft scraping of pottery and cooking implements. The homes we pass are simple but functional, built from sun-dried mud bricks that provide insulation against the desert heat. Most houses consist of just a few rooms, with flat roofs that serve as additional living space during the cooler evening hours. The cooking areas are typically located in small courtyards, where open fires can be safely maintained and where smoke can disperse into the open air. As we pause to observe one family preparing their evening meal, we notice the deliberate, unhurried pace of their activities. The mother of the household kneels beside a low grinding stone, slowly working grain into flour with patient, rhythmic motions. Her movements are practiced and efficient, honed by years of performing this same task day after day. There is a meditative quality to her work, a quiet acceptance of the time and effort required to transform raw grain into something edible. Nearby, her teenage daughter tends a small fire built in a depression in the ground, carefully feeding dried grass and animal dung to the flames to maintain a steady cooking temperature. The fuel is precious and must be used efficiently, so she monitors the fire constantly, adjusting the airflow and adding fuel sparingly. The smoke rises gently into the calm evening air, carrying with it the earthy sense of burning organic matter. The ingredients available for their meal are limited but represent the foundation of ancient Egyptian cuisine. A basket contains onions, their papery skins catching the firelight as they wait to be peeled and chopped. Another container holds dried fish, preserved from the Nile's seasonal abundance and now constituting one of the family's primary protein sources. A large clay jar contains grain that has been laboriously harvested, processed, and stored against future need. Let yourself feel the profound simplicity of this scene as it unfolds before you. There are no complex seasonings to choose from, no elaborate cooking techniques to master, no complicated recipes to follow. The meal that this family will share consists of the same basic elements that sustained their ancestors for generations: bread baked from ground grain, fish caught from the river, onions grown in their small garden plot, and water drawn from the Nile. The bread-making process itself is a lengthy affair that requires both skill and patience. The flour, once ground, must be mixed with water and a small amount of leftover dough from the previous day to serve as a natural leavening agent. The mixture is kneaded by hand until it reaches the proper consistency, then shaped into flat rounds that can be baked on hot stones beside the fire. The aroma of baking bread begins to fill the courtyard, a rich, yeasty scent that speaks of sustenance and comfort despite its simplicity. This bread will form the foundation of the meal, serving as both the primary source of carbohydrates and as a utensil for scooping up other foods. It will be dense and slightly coarse by modern standards, with a hearty texture that reflects the whole grains from which it was made. As the bread bakes, the dried fish is prepared for eating. It must be soaked briefly in water to soften it, then torn into small pieces that can be easily chewed. The preservation process has given the fish a strong, salty flavor and a tough, chewy texture quite different from fresh fish. Yet for this family, it represents valuable protein and essential nutrients that might otherwise be unavailable. The onions are peeled and chopped with a simple bronze knife, releasing their sharp, pungent aroma into the evening air. These vegetables, along with garlic and leeks, formed the backbone of flavoring in ancient Egyptian cooking. Without access to exotic spices from distant lands, cooks relied on these local alliums to add variety and interest to otherwise bland meals. Water for the meal comes from a large ceramic jar that was filled earlier in the day at the river. It has been allowed to settle so that any sediment sinks to the bottom, and it will be consumed warm rather than cool, as there is no practical way to chill it in this climate. For many ancient Egyptians, beer was actually preferred over water as a daily beverage, as the brewing process made it safer to drink and provided additional nutrients. As we observe this family's meal preparation, notice how every action is purposeful and economical. Nothing is wasted or discarded carelessly. The grain hulls will be saved for animal feed, the onion skins will be composted or burned for fuel, and any leftover cooked food will be carefully stored for the next day's meal. This frugality is not born of choice but of necessity, as resources are limited and must be managed carefully to ensure survival. The cooking vessels themselves are simple but effective, made from locally produced clay and fired in kilns that reach temperatures sufficient to create durable, heat-resistant pottery. The pots and bowls show signs of long use, their surfaces darkened by smoke and stained by countless meals. There are no matching sets or decorative elements, each piece is valued purely for its functionality. As the meal nears completion, the family begins to gather in the courtyard. The father returns from his day's labor in the fields, his skin bronzed by the sun and his movements showing the weariness of physical work. The younger children emerge from the house where they have been resting during the hottest part of the day. Everyone settles onto woven mats spread on the ground, forming a circle around the simple meal that has been prepared. The atmosphere is peaceful and unhurried. There is no sense of rushing through the meal to move on to other activities, no distraction from external entertainment or stimulation. The focus is entirely on the basic human need for nourishment and the simple pleasure of sharing food with loved ones at the end of a long day. As you witness this scene, let yourself sink deeper into a state of calm contemplation. Feel your body becoming more and more relaxed as you absorb the tranquil rhythms of this ancient life. The stresses and complexities of modern existence seem to fade away, replaced by an appreciation for the fundamental simplicity of human needs and the quiet satisfaction that comes from meeting those needs with patience and care. The sounds of the village around us gradually soften into a gentle murmur, distant conversations, the occasional lowing of cattle, the soft splash of the Nile in the gathering darkness. These peaceful background noises create a soothing atmosphere that encourages deeper relaxation and contemplative rest. As we continue our gentle journey through this ancient world, let yourself become even more deeply relaxed as we explore the actual experience of eating in ancient Egypt. The meal we have been observing is now ready to be consumed, and we can begin to understand what sustenance meant to people living thousands of years before our modern food systems existed. The family settles around their simple meal, each person taking their place on woven mats that have been spread on the ground. The father, as the head of the household, is served first, receiving a piece of the freshly baked bread while it is still warm from the cooking stones. The bread has a dense, heavy texture that requires considerable chewing, quite different from the light, fluffy breads we know today. As he tears off a piece of bread, you can see that it is not the uniform, refined product of modern bakeries. The surface is uneven and slightly charred in places where it came into direct contact with the hot stones. Small pieces of grain hull and other plant matter are visible throughout the bread, giving it a coarse, rustic appearance. The color is darker than modern wheat bread, closer to what we might call a dense whole grain loaf. The taste of this ancient bread would be unfamiliar to modern palates. Without refined flour, commercial yeast, or added sugars, it has a distinctly earthy, somewhat bitter flavor. The natural fermentation process that leavens the dough also creates subtle sour notes, similar to sourdough bread but less pronounced. Most notably, the bread often contains sand and grit from the grinding process, creating a distinctly crunchy texture that would be considered unacceptable in today's food standards. Let yourself relax more deeply as you imagine the simple acceptance with which this family consumes their daily bread. There is no complaint about the texture or flavor, no wish for something different or better. This is simply what bread is in their world, and they eat it with quiet gratitude, understanding that it represents the fundamental difference between sustenance and hunger. The dried fish that accompanies the bread presents its own unique challenges and characteristics. After being soaked in water to soften it slightly, the fish still retains a tough, jerky-like consistency that requires patient chewing. The preservation process has intensified the fish's natural flavors, creating a powerfully salty, somewhat fishy taste that modern food lovers might find overwhelming. Small bones, scales, and other parts that would typically be removed in modern fish preparation remain embedded in the flesh. Family members carefully pick these out as they eat, a process that slows down the meal and requires constant attention. The fish provides essential protein and nutrients, but consuming it is more of a survival necessity than a culinary pleasure. The onions that round out the meal offer a sharp, pungent flavor that brings tears to the eyes and burns the throat slightly when consumed raw. Without the mild, sweet onions developed through centuries of agricultural refinement, these ancient varieties are intensely flavored and somewhat harsh. They are eaten primarily for their nutritional value and their ability to add some variety to an otherwise monotonous diet. As we observe the family eating, notice the patience and care with which they approach their meal. Each bite is chewed thoroughly, not only because the tough textures require it, but because food is too precious to be rushed or wasted. Crumbs that fall are carefully gathered up and consumed. Every grain of bread, every piece of fish, every bite of onion is valued and appreciated. The water that accompanies the meal is warm and has a distinctly muddy taste from the Nile sediment that inevitably makes its way into drinking supplies despite efforts to filter it. Sometimes the water carries other flavors as well, picking up minerals from the clay storage jars or taking on slight organic tastes from the various uses to which the river is put upstream. Yet this water is precious and life-giving in the desert environment, and it is consumed with the same grateful acceptance as the food. Let your breathing become even slower and deeper as you contemplate this scene of simple sustenance. Feel your body sinking further into relaxation as you appreciate the profound difference between eating for survival and eating for pleasure. In this ancient world, meals are not about enjoyment or entertainment, but about the basic human need to fuel the body for another day of labor and life. The pace of eating is deliberate and unhurried. Without clocks or schedules to rush toward, the family takes whatever time is needed to properly consume their meal. Conversation is quiet and focused on practical matters, the next day's work, the condition of the crops, news from neighboring families. There is no external entertainment, no distractions from the simple act of nourishing the body. Children learn to eat with the same patience and acceptance as their parents, understanding from an early age that food is a serious matter not to be wasted or taken for granted. They do not fuss or complain about flavors or textures, having never experienced the refined tastes and varied cuisines that might make them dissatisfied with simple fare. For them, this is simply what food is, and they consume it with the same matter-of-fact acceptance that they accept all other aspects of their daily existence. The textures and flavors we are observing represent the reality of human sustenance for most of recorded history. The soft, refined, carefully seasoned foods that we consider normal today are actually historical anomalies, available only in very recent times and only in certain parts of the world. For thousands of years, humans survived and even thrived on foods that would seem harsh, unpalatable, or inadequate by modern standards. As the meal progresses, family members begin to show signs of satisfaction despite the simplicity of their fare. Hunger, which was a constant companion for many ancient Egyptians, begins to recede as their bodies receive the nutrients they need. The bread provides carbohydrates for energy, the fish supplies protein for muscle maintenance and growth, the onions offer vitamins and minerals that help prevent disease. The quantity of food consumed is also different from modern portions. Without abundant supplies or reliable storage methods, people ate smaller amounts and felt full on less food than we might consider adequate today. Their bodies, accustomed to periods of scarcity, were efficient at extracting maximum nutrition from minimal input. As the meal draws to a close, the cleanup process begins with the same careful attention to conservation that characterized the preparation. Any remaining food is wrapped in cloth or stored in covered jars for the next day. The cooking vessels are cleaned with sand and water, then carefully dried and put away. Nothing is discarded that might have value or use in the future. Feel yourself becoming more and more peaceful as you observe these ancient rhythms of sustenance and conservation. The simple acceptance of basic food, the grateful consumption of whatever is available, the careful management of precious resources, all create an atmosphere of quiet contentment that seems to slow time itself. The evening light continues to fade as we witness this timeless scene of human nourishment. The harsh realities of ancient Egyptian cuisine begin to seem less harsh and more simply different, representing a way of life that was sustainable, community-oriented, and deeply connected to the natural world that provided sustenance. Let these images and sensations continue to deepen your relaxation as we prepare to explore even further into this ancient world of simple sustenance and profound acceptance. As we settle even more deeply into our contemplation of ancient Egyptian food culture, let yourself become increasingly relaxed as we explore the broader patterns of daily sustenance that shaped life along the Nile thousands of years ago. The evening meal we have been observing represents just one moment in a continuous cycle of food-related activities that dominated the lives of ordinary people in this ancient civilization. The day typically began before dawn, when the air was still cool and the work of food preparation could begin without the overwhelming heat that would later make such activities nearly unbearable. Women would rise first, quietly leaving their sleeping families to begin the labor-intensive process of preparing the day's sustenance. The grinding of grain was often the first task, as fresh flour was preferred when possible, and the rhythmic sound of stone against stone would gradually wake the household. Imagine yourself in this pre-dawn darkness, feeling the cool air against your skin as you observe these ancient morning rituals. The woman of the house kneels beside her grinding stones, working steadily in the dim light of an oil lamp or the early morning stars. Her movements are automatic, perfected through years of daily repetition, and there is something deeply meditative about the repetitive motion of grinding grain into flour. The grain itself was the foundation of ancient Egyptian nutrition, primarily wheat and barley that was grown in the fertile strips of land along the Nile. However, this grain was far different from the refined varieties we know today. It was coarser, harder, and often contaminated with sand, stones, and other debris that made its way into the food supply during harvesting, storage, and processing. As the grinding continues, the woman periodically pauses to sift the flour through a woven basket, removing the larger pieces of debris while accepting that smaller particles of sand and stone will remain. This gritty contamination was simply an accepted part of daily nutrition, contributing to the severe dental wear that archaeologists have found in ancient Egyptian remains. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you contemplate the acceptance and resignation with which people approached these realities of ancient food preparation. There was no alternative, no higher standard to aspire to, no sense that food should be pure or refined. This was simply the nature of sustenance in their world, and they approached it with practical determination rather than complaint or dissatisfaction. The bread that would eventually emerge from this laboriously ground flour was dense, heavy, and often quite coarse. It required significant chewing and provided substantial calories, but it bore little resemblance to the light, airy breads that we consider normal today. The fermentation process, which relied on wild yeasts and leftover dough from previous days, was unpredictable and sometimes resulted in bread that was more sour or bitter than intended. As the sun rises and the day grows warmer, other food-related activities begin throughout the village. Men who work as fishermen prepare their nets and boats for another day on the Nile, hoping to catch enough fish to feed their families and perhaps have some left over for preservation or trade. The fishing techniques are simple but effective, using nets woven from plant fibers and boats made from bundled papyrus reeds. The fish they catch are primarily from the Nile River system, including species that are still found in Egyptian waters today: tilapia, catfish, perch, and various smaller fish that can be caught in nets or with simple hooks. However, without modern refrigeration or ice, these fish must be consumed quickly after being caught, or immediately processed for preservation through drying, salting, or smoking. Feel yourself becoming more and more relaxed as you observe the timeless rhythm of these activities. The fishermen work steadily in the growing heat, their movements economical and practiced, understanding that their success today will determine whether their families eat protein or subsist on bread and vegetables alone. Meanwhile, in the agricultural areas surrounding the villages, farmers tend to small plots of vegetables that supplement the basic diet of grain and fish. These gardens produce onions, leeks, garlic, lettuce, cucumbers, and various other vegetables that can tolerate the hot, dry climate and the seasonal flooding of the Nile. The vegetables grown in ancient Egypt were often quite different from their modern counterparts. Centuries of selective breeding have created the mild, sweet varieties we know today, while ancient vegetables tended to be smaller, more bitter, and more strongly flavored. Lettuce was grown primarily for its seeds, which were pressed to produce oil, while the leaves themselves were often bitter and tough. Cucumbers provided precious moisture in the hot climate, but they were typically smaller and more bitter than modern varieties. Onions and garlic were essential not only for flavoring but also for their medicinal properties, as they were believed to prevent disease and provide strength for physical labor. As the day progresses and the heat becomes more intense, food-related activities shift to the cooler, shaded areas of homes and courtyards. This is when preserved foods are prepared, taking advantage of the intense heat and dry air to remove moisture and prevent spoilage. Fish are cleaned and laid out on reed mats to dry in the sun, while vegetables are sliced and spread out for dehydration. The preservation process was essential for survival, especially during the annual flood season when fresh food sources might be limited or when traveling away from the immediate vicinity of the Nile. However, these preservation methods fundamentally changed the taste and texture of foods, often making them quite different from what we would consider palatable today. Dried fish became intensely salty and tough, requiring extensive soaking and careful chewing to consume. Dried vegetables lost much of their original flavor and took on concentrated, sometimes bitter tastes that could be overwhelming. Yet these preserved foods represented the difference between life and death during lean periods, and they were consumed with gratitude despite their challenging flavors and textures. Let yourself sink even deeper into contemplation as you observe the patient acceptance with which ancient people approached these realities of food preservation and consumption. There was no expectation that food should be convenient, mild, or immediately pleasant to eat. Instead, there was a deep understanding that sustenance was a serious matter requiring careful planning, hard work, and grateful acceptance of whatever nutrition was available. The midday meal, when it occurred at all, was typically simple and light, consisting perhaps of bread, leftover fish from the previous evening, and water or weak beer. The intense heat made heavy eating uncomfortable, and most families conserved their energy and appetite for the more substantial evening meal when temperatures began to cool. Beer was indeed a staple beverage for many ancient Egyptians, not because of its alcoholic content but because the brewing process made it safer to drink than untreated river water. The beer was typically quite weak, more like liquid bread than the strong alcoholic beverages we know today, and it provided both hydration and essential calories for people engaged in hard physical labor. The brewing process itself was labor-intensive and required careful timing to prevent spoilage in the hot climate. Grain was partially baked into a rough bread, then crumbled and mixed with water and allowed to ferment. The result was a thick, porridge-like beverage that was strained through baskets to remove the larger solids before drinking. As afternoon gives way to evening, the cycle of food preparation begins again, with families gathering ingredients for their primary meal of the day. This is when any meat that has been acquired through hunting, livestock, or trade might be prepared, though for most families, meat was a rare luxury rather than a daily staple. When meat was available, it was typically tough and strongly flavored, coming from animals that lived hard-working lives in the harsh Egyptian environment. Cattle were primarily work animals, used for plowing and transportation, and were only slaughtered when they became too old or injured to work. Poultry was more common but still considered a special treat rather than everyday food. Feel your body continuing to relax as you absorb these images of ancient sustenance, letting the patient rhythms of this ancient world slow your breathing and quiet your mind. The simple acceptance of basic nutrition, the grateful consumption of whatever was available, the community cooperation required to secure adequate food, all create an atmosphere of calm resignation and practical wisdom that seems to transcend the specific details of ancient Egyptian cuisine. As we continue deeper into our contemplative journey through ancient Egyptian food culture, let yourself become even more profoundly relaxed as we explore the philosophical and spiritual dimensions of sustenance in this ancient world. The physical realities of eating in ancient Egypt, while challenging by modern standards, offer us insights into a way of life that was more directly connected to the fundamental needs of human existence. In this ancient civilization, the relationship between people and their food was immediate and personal in ways that we can barely imagine today. Every grain of wheat, every fish from the river, every onion pulled from the garden represented not just nutrition but survival itself. There was no separation between the production and consumption of food, no long supply chains or industrial processing that obscured the origins of what people ate. Imagine yourself sitting quietly in the evening coolness of an ancient Egyptian courtyard, feeling the day's heat gradually dissipating from the mud brick walls around you. The family we have been observing has finished their simple meal and now sits in peaceful contemplation, their bodies nourished and their immediate survival needs met for another day. There is something profoundly satisfying about this simple state of basic contentment. The ancient Egyptians lived with an acceptance of limitation that we find difficult to comprehend in our modern world of abundance and choice. They understood that food was seasonal, unpredictable, and sometimes scarce, and they adapted their expectations and desires accordingly. During times of plenty, they worked hard to preserve and store what they could. During times of scarcity, they reduced their consumption and found satisfaction in smaller portions. This acceptance extended to the quality and variety of available food as well. There was no expectation that meals should be exciting, varied, or particularly flavorful. Food was fuel for the body, sustenance for another day of life and work, and protection against the ever-present threat of hunger. The idea that eating should be entertainment or that food should provide sensory pleasure was largely foreign to the daily experience of most people. Let your breathing become even slower and deeper as you contemplate this fundamentally different relationship with sustenance. Feel yourself sinking into a state of profound relaxation as you consider how this acceptance of simplicity might have created its own form of peace and contentment, free from the constant desire for more, better, or different food that characterizes much of modern life. The preparation and consumption of food in ancient Egypt was also a deeply communal activity that strengthened family and community bonds. The labor-intensive process of grinding grain, preparing bread, preserving fish, and maintaining gardens required cooperation and shared effort. Children learned these skills by working alongside their parents, creating a continuity of knowledge and tradition that connected generations. Meals themselves were social occasions that brought families together at the end of long days of work. Without external entertainment or distractions, conversation focused on immediate practical concerns, community news, and the simple pleasure of sharing sustenance with loved ones. There was time to truly taste and appreciate the food, however simple it might be, and to feel gratitude for the basic fact of having enough to eat. The seasonal rhythms of food availability created a natural calendar that governed much of ancient Egyptian life. The annual flooding of the Nile determined when crops could be planted and harvested, when fish would be most abundant, and when food preservation activities needed to be intensified. People lived in harmony with these natural cycles, understanding that abundance and scarcity were both temporary conditions that required different responses. During the flood season, when the Nile covered much of the agricultural land, fresh vegetables became scarce and families relied more heavily on preserved foods and whatever could be grown in elevated areas. This was also the time when intensive food preservation activities took place, as the hot, dry climate was ideal for drying fish, vegetables, and other perishable items. Feel yourself becoming more and more peaceful as you imagine the rhythm of these ancient seasons, the patient acceptance of natural limitations, and the quiet satisfaction that came from successfully providing basic sustenance for family and community. Let these images of simple survival and fundamental contentment deepen your relaxation and calm your mind. The tools and techniques used for food preparation in ancient Egypt were simple but effective, refined through generations of use and perfectly adapted to the available materials and environmental conditions. Grinding stones, clay pots, wooden spoons, and bronze knives represented the sum total of kitchen equipment for most families, yet these basic implements were sufficient to transform raw ingredients into edible meals. There was no waste in this system, no disposable packaging or single-use items that created ongoing costs and environmental problems. Everything was designed for durability and multiple uses, and every scrap of organic material was composted, fed to animals, or used as fuel. This efficiency was born of necessity but created a sustainable way of life that had minimal impact on the environment. The flavors and textures that characterized ancient Egyptian cuisine were the natural result of available ingredients and preservation methods rather than deliberate culinary choices. Salt, the primary preservative, dominated many dishes. The natural fermentation that preserved bread and beer created sour, yeasty flavors. The drying process intensified and concentrated whatever flavors were present in the original ingredients. Yet within these constraints, ancient Egyptian cooks developed preferences and techniques that added variety and interest to their limited repertoire. Certain combinations of available ingredients were favored over others. Specific methods of preparation became traditional within families or communities. Even within the narrow range of possibilities, there was room for creativity and personal expression. As we continue to observe this ancient family in their evening contemplation, notice how their satisfaction seems to come not from the quality of their food but from the simple fact of having successfully met their basic needs for another day. There is no restlessness, no desire for something different or better, no sense that their meal was inadequate or unsatisfying. They have eaten, their hunger is satisfied, and they are content. This contentment extended beyond the immediate meal to encompass a broader acceptance of life's fundamental conditions. Ancient Egyptians understood that human existence was precarious, that survival required constant effort, and that satisfaction came from successfully meeting basic needs rather than from pursuing luxury or pleasure. This perspective created a different kind of happiness, based on appreciation for simple necessities rather than desire for elaborate experiences. The evening air grows cooler as night approaches, and the sounds of the village gradually quiet into a peaceful murmur. Cooking fires burn low as families finish their meals and begin to prepare for sleep. The work of securing food for the day is complete, and there is a sense of accomplishment and gratitude that comes from having successfully nourished the body and maintained life for another cycle. Let yourself feel this ancient peace settling around you like a comfortable blanket, slowing your heartbeat and deepening your breathing. The stresses and complexities of modern food choices seem to fade away, replaced by appreciation for the simple miracle of basic sustenance and the profound satisfaction that comes from having enough to eat. In this contemplative state, the harsh realities of ancient Egyptian cuisine begin to seem less harsh and more simply different, representing a way of life that was sustainable, community-oriented, and deeply connected to the natural rhythms of earth and season. The limited variety, challenging textures, and preservation-dominated flavors were simply the conditions within which people found satisfaction and built meaningful lives. As you continue to relax more deeply, let these images of ancient simplicity and acceptance create a sense of peaceful gratitude for both the abundance of modern food systems and the timeless human capacity to find contentment within whatever limitations existence provides. As we move deeper into our contemplative journey through the ancient world of Egyptian sustenance, allow yourself to sink into an even more profound state of relaxation. The evening has fully arrived in our ancient village, and the gentle sounds of night begin to replace the activities of day. This is the time when the ancient Egyptians, having completed their daily struggle for sustenance, would settle into the peaceful satisfaction that comes from having met their most basic needs. In the courtyard where we have been observing this ancient family, the last light of day fades into the gentle darkness of an Egyptian night. The air, finally cool after the intense heat of day, carries the sounds of distant conversation, the soft lowing of cattle being settled for the night, and the gentle splash of the Nile as it continues its eternal journey northward through the desert. The family sits quietly together, their simple meal complete, their bodies nourished for another cycle of life and work. There is something deeply peaceful about this moment of basic satisfaction, this fundamental contentment that comes from having enough to eat and a safe place to rest. In our modern world of abundant choices and constant stimulation, we rarely experience this simple form of gratitude and peace. Let your breathing become even slower and deeper as you absorb the tranquil atmosphere of this ancient evening. Feel your muscles relaxing more completely as you imagine yourself settling into the same state of basic contentment that characterized the end of each day for these ancient people. There is no anxiety about tomorrow's food, no restless desire for different or better sustenance, no sense that life is lacking in essential ways. The ancient Egyptians had developed a profound acceptance of life's fundamental conditions that allowed them to find peace within circumstances that we might consider harsh or limiting. They understood that food was sometimes scarce, often monotonous, and rarely what we would call delicious, yet they had learned to find satisfaction in the simple fact of having enough to sustain life and health. This acceptance was not resignation or defeat, but rather a mature understanding of human existence that recognized the difference between needs and wants, between survival and luxury, between contentment and endless desire. They had learned to appreciate the miracle of basic sustenance without demanding that it also provide entertainment, variety, or sensory pleasure. As night deepens around our ancient village, imagine yourself feeling more and more relaxed, more and more at peace with the simple realities of human existence. The gentle sounds of the evening create a soothing background that encourages deeper contemplation and more profound rest. The harsh realities of ancient Egyptian cuisine no longer seem harsh but simply different, representing a way of life that was more directly connected to the fundamental processes of survival and sustenance. In this ancient world, the work of securing food was never complete, never finished, never something that could be taken for granted. Each day required renewed effort to gather, prepare, and preserve whatever nutrition was available. Yet this constant engagement with the basics of survival created its own form of meaning and satisfaction, a deep connection to the processes that sustain life itself. The grinding of grain, the preparation of bread, the preservation of fish, the tending of gardens, all of these activities were not just chores to be completed but essential connections to the sources of life and health. People understood intimately where their food came from, how it was produced, and what was required to transform raw ingredients into edible sustenance. Feel yourself sinking deeper into contemplation as you consider how this intimate connection with food production might have created a different relationship with eating itself. When every grain of bread represents hours of labor, when every piece of fish represents skill and luck in catching and preserving it, when every vegetable represents careful tending and successful harvest, the act of eating becomes charged with meaning and gratitude. The textures and flavors that we have been exploring, the challenging preservation methods and limited variety, all take on different significance when viewed from this perspective of intimate connection and grateful appreciation. The gritty texture of bread becomes a reminder of the labor required to transform grain into nutrition. The intense saltiness of preserved fish becomes a symbol of successful preparation for times of scarcity. Even the monotony of the ancient Egyptian diet, the repetitive consumption of bread, fish, onions, and beer, day after day, season after season, creates its own form of peace and stability. There are no difficult decisions to make about what to eat, no overwhelming variety to choose from, no anxiety about making the right food choices. There is simply the reliable provision of basic nutrition, consumed with gratitude and satisfaction. As you continue to relax more deeply, let yourself feel the profound peace that comes from this acceptance of simplicity and limitation. In our modern world, we are often overwhelmed by choices, stressed by decisions, and dissatisfied by the gap between our desires and our reality. The ancient Egyptians, by necessity, had learned to find contentment within much narrower boundaries, and perhaps there is wisdom in their example. The evening conversation in our ancient courtyard is quiet and unhurried, focused on practical matters and simple observations about the day's work and the night's rest to come. There is no entertainment beyond the pleasure of family companionship, no stimulation beyond the gentle sounds of the village settling into sleep, no excitement beyond the basic satisfaction of having successfully completed another day of survival. Yet within this simplicity, there is a quality of presence and attention that we rarely achieve in our busy, stimulated modern lives. The ancient Egyptians were fully present to their immediate experience, fully engaged with their basic needs and simple pleasures, fully appreciative of the fundamental gift of life and sustenance. The stars begin to appear in the clear Egyptian sky, the same constellations that guided the ancient Egyptians in their agricultural cycles and religious observances. The night air carries the sense of the day's cooking fires, now dying down to glowing embers, and the distant fragrance of the Nile with its life-giving waters. In this peaceful setting, let yourself feel more and more relaxed, more and more at peace with the simple realities of human existence. The challenges and limitations of ancient Egyptian cuisine become opportunities for appreciating the fundamental miracle of sustenance itself, the basic gift of having enough nutrition to sustain life and health. The family we have been observing begins to prepare for sleep, moving slowly and peacefully through the simple rituals that mark the end of their day. There is no rush, no anxiety about tomorrow's challenges, no restless desire for different experiences or better circumstances. They have met their basic needs for another day, and that is enough. As you witness this ancient peace, this fundamental satisfaction with basic necessities, let yourself absorb the calm and contentment that characterize their evening rest. Feel your own body settling into deeper relaxation, your own mind releasing the stresses and complications of modern life, your own spirit finding peace in the timeless rhythms of survival and sustenance. The gentle sounds of night continue to deepen around us, creating an atmosphere of profound tranquility that encourages the most restful and restorative sleep. In this ancient world, sleep comes naturally and easily to bodies that have worked hard during the day and minds that have found satisfaction in meeting life's basic requirements. As we continue deeper into this contemplative journey through ancient Egypt, allow yourself to enter an even more profound state of peace and acceptance. The night has fully embraced our ancient village, and in the gentle darkness, there is a quality of timeless wisdom that transcends the specific details of food and sustenance to touch something deeper about the nature of human contentment and spiritual satisfaction. In the quiet courtyard where our ancient family has settled for the night, there is a stillness that goes beyond mere absence of sound or activity. It is the stillness of people who have found their place in the natural order, who understand their role in the cycles of life and sustenance, and who have learned to find deep satisfaction in fulfilling their basic responsibilities to themselves and their loved ones. The mother of the household sits quietly in the cooling air, her hands resting peacefully in her lap after a day of grinding grain, tending fires, and preparing the simple meal that has nourished her family. There is something beautiful about the calm satisfaction on her face, the sense of work well done and duties faithfully fulfilled. She has successfully transformed raw ingredients into sustenance, secured another day of survival for those in her care, and participated in the ancient dance of life-sustaining life. Let yourself feel this profound sense of accomplishment and peace settling around you like the gentle night air. Allow your breathing to slow even further as you contemplate the deep satisfaction that comes from fulfilling life's most essential functions. In our modern world of complex careers and abstract achievements, we rarely experience this fundamental form of success, this basic pride in having met the most elemental needs of human existence. The father sits nearby, his body showing the honest weariness of physical labor under the Egyptian sun. His hands, calloused from working in the fields and handling the tools of agriculture, rest peacefully as he surveys his small domain. He has successfully grown and harvested grain, contributed to the food stores that will sustain his family through lean times, and fulfilled his role as provider and protector. There is a dignity in this simple success that transcends any material limitations. The children, already drowsy from their day of learning and play, settle close to their parents with the unconscious security of beings who know they are safe, fed, and loved. They have never known a world different from this one, never experienced abundance that might make them dissatisfied with simplicity, never learned to want more than what is necessary for health and happiness. Feel yourself sinking deeper into contemplation as you observe this scene of ancient family contentment. There is something profoundly moving about the way these people have found peace and satisfaction within circumstances that we might consider limiting or harsh. They have discovered forms of wealth that have nothing to do with material abundance, sources of happiness that require no external validation or stimulation. The simple meal they have shared, with its challenging textures and basic flavors, has become a sacrament of survival and community. The bread, ground from grain with infinite patience and baked over carefully tended fires, represents not just nutrition but the transformation of raw earth into life-giving sustenance. The fish, caught from the life-giving Nile and preserved through skill and foresight, connects them to the river that is the source of all life in their desert homeland. Even the water they drink, warm and carrying the taste of the Nile's minerals and sediment, becomes precious when understood as the fundamental requirement for all life, the substance without which nothing else matters. In a world where water must be carried by hand from the river to the home, where every drop is precious and nothing is wasted, the simple act of drinking becomes an act of gratitude and connection to the source of all existence. As the night deepens around us, let yourself feel more and more relaxed, more and more connected to these ancient rhythms of satisfaction and rest. The stars above our ancient village are the same stars that shine down on us today, creating a bridge across thousands of years that reminds us of the fundamental continuity of human experience and human needs. In this ancient world, the relationship between effort and reward was immediate and clear. The labor invested in growing, harvesting, and preparing food was directly connected to the nutrition that sustained life and health. There were no complex economic systems, no abstract exchanges of value, no separation between work and its immediate benefits. This clarity created its own form of meaning and satisfaction. The ancient Egyptians understood that survival required constant vigilance and effort, yet they had learned to find joy and peace within this necessity. The grinding of grain became a meditation, the tending of fires became a sacred duty, the sharing of simple meals became a celebration of community and family love. They had transformed the basic requirements of survival into opportunities for spiritual growth and human connection. Feel yourself becoming more and more peaceful as you absorb these insights into ancient wisdom and contentment. In our modern world of abundance and choice, we often find ourselves stressed by decisions, overwhelmed by options, and dissatisfied by the gap between our desires and our reality. The ancient Egyptians, by necessity, had learned to find contentment within much narrower boundaries, and perhaps there is profound wisdom in their example. The limitations of their diet, the simplicity of their ingredients, the challenging preservation methods, all of these apparent disadvantages had become opportunities for developing patience, gratitude, and acceptance. They had learned to find variety within repetition, satisfaction within simplicity, and abundance within basic sufficiency. As you continue to relax more deeply, let yourself feel connected to this ancient wisdom about the nature of true satisfaction and genuine peace. The harsh realities of ancient Egyptian cuisine begin to reveal themselves as teachers, offering lessons about the difference between needs and wants, between survival and luxury, between contentment and endless desire. The gentle sounds of night in our ancient village create a soothing background for deeper contemplation. The distant murmur of the Nile, the soft settling sounds of animals finding rest, the quiet conversations of neighbors sharing the peaceful end of another day, all blend into a symphony of ancient tranquility that encourages the most profound relaxation and restorative rest. In this deep quiet, the ancient Egyptians would often engage in simple forms of prayer or meditation, offering gratitude for the day's sustenance and asking for continued provision and protection. Their relationship with the divine was intimately connected to the basic processes of survival and sustenance, recognizing that life itself was a gift that required both human effort and divine blessing to maintain. The bread they had eaten was understood to be a gift from the gods who controlled the flooding of the Nile and the fertility of the soil. The fish they consumed were seen as provisions from the river deity who governed the waters that gave life to their desert homeland. Even the challenging aspects of their diet were accepted as part of the natural order, reflecting the balance between abundance and scarcity that governed all existence. This spiritual dimension of ancient Egyptian food culture adds another layer of meaning to our contemplation. The simple act of eating becomes a form of communion with the divine forces that govern life and death, abundance and scarcity, joy and sorrow. Every meal becomes an opportunity for gratitude and recognition of human dependence on powers greater than individual will or effort. Let this spiritual perspective deepen your relaxation and peace as you contemplate the profound connections between physical sustenance and spiritual nourishment. The ancient Egyptians had learned to find the sacred within the mundane, the eternal within the temporal, the infinite within the most basic and simple aspects of daily existence. As the night air continues to cool and the sounds of the village fade into peaceful silence, feel yourself settling into the same state of deep acceptance and spiritual contentment that characterized the ancient Egyptian approach to life and sustenance. This is a peace that goes beyond circumstances, a satisfaction that transcends material conditions, a form of wealth that requires no external validation or enhancement. As our contemplative journey through ancient Egyptian food culture draws toward its peaceful conclusion, allow yourself to sink into the deepest levels of relaxation and tranquil acceptance. The night has fully settled over our ancient village, and in the profound stillness that follows the completion of another day's survival, there is a quality of sacred rest that prepares both body and soul for the restorative gift of sleep. The ancient family we have been observing has completed all the rituals of their evening. The simple meal has been consumed with gratitude, the cooking vessels have been cleaned and stored, the precious remaining food has been carefully preserved for tomorrow's needs. Now, in the cool darkness of the Egyptian night, they prepare for the deep rest that will restore their strength for another cycle of life and sustenance. In the courtyard where they have gathered, the last embers of the cooking fire glow softly, casting gentle shadows on the mud brick walls and creating a sense of warmth and security in the surrounding darkness. The air is finally cool enough to be comfortable after the intense heat of the day, and a gentle breeze carries the night scents of the Nile and the distant desert, creating an atmosphere of profound peace and natural harmony. Let yourself feel this ancient peace settling into your own body and mind as you observe the gentle preparations for rest. The mother of the household moves slowly and quietly, checking on each family member with the careful attention of someone whose primary responsibility is the welfare of those in her care. Her movements are economical and purposeful, yet unhurried, reflecting the understanding that this transition from waking to sleeping is itself a sacred time that deserves respect and attention. The children, already drowsy from their day of simple activities and basic nourishment, settle onto sleeping mats woven from reeds that grow along the Nile. These mats are their beds, simple but comfortable, providing a barrier between their bodies and the earth while allowing them to remain connected to the natural world that sustains them. There are no elaborate furnishings or complex comfort systems, yet the children settle into sleep with the easy contentment of beings whose basic needs have been met. Feel your own body beginning to settle into deeper and deeper relaxation as you witness this ancient preparation for rest. The simplicity of their sleeping arrangements, the basic nature of their comfort, the acceptance of limitation and the finding of peace within those limitations, all contribute to an atmosphere of profound tranquility that seems to slow time itself and create space for the most restorative and healing rest. The father of the household sits quietly for a few moments, looking out into the star-filled night sky that has witnessed countless generations of Egyptian families completing their daily cycles of work and rest. His body, tired from honest labor in the fields and orchards that provide the basic sustenance for his family's survival, begins to release the tensions of the day as he prepares to surrender to the healing gift of sleep. In this ancient world, sleep was not seen as a break from living but as an essential part of the natural cycle that sustains life itself. Just as the Nile rose and fell according to cosmic rhythms, just as crops grew and were harvested according to seasonal patterns, just as the sun crossed the sky each day in its eternal journey, so human beings followed their own cycles of activity and rest that connected them to the fundamental rhythms of existence. The sleep of these ancient people was often deeper and more restorative than what we experience in our modern world of artificial lighting and constant stimulation. Their bodies, exhausted by physical labor and simple nourishment, surrendered completely to rest when darkness fell. Their minds, uncluttered by the complex anxieties and endless choices that characterize modern life, found peace in the basic satisfaction of having survived another day and met their essential needs. As you continue to relax more deeply, let yourself feel connected to this ancient understanding of rest as a sacred necessity, not a luxury or interruption, but an essential component of the life cycle that deserves as much respect and attention as the activities of waking hours. The ancient Egyptians had learned to prepare for sleep with the same care and intention that they brought to their work, understanding that good rest was essential for the strength and clarity needed for survival. The simple food they had consumed during their evening meal now begins to provide the nutrients their bodies need for the restoration and healing that occurs during sleep. The bread, dense with whole grains and natural fiber, provides sustained energy release throughout the night. The fish, rich in protein despite its preservation-altered flavor, supplies the amino acids needed for muscle repair and growth. Even the challenging aspects of their diet contribute to the deep, uninterrupted sleep that comes from bodies that are truly tired and genuinely nourished. In the gentle darkness of their sleeping area, family members settle close to one another, finding comfort and security in proximity and shared presence. This closeness is not just practical, providing warmth and protection, but also emotional and spiritual, reinforcing the bonds of love and mutual care that make survival not just possible but meaningful. The sounds of the night create a natural lullaby that encourages deeper and deeper relaxation. The distant flow of the Nile provides a constant, soothing background rhythm that connects all sleep to the great river that is the source of life in this desert land. The gentle night sounds of animals settling into rest, the soft whisper of evening breezes through palm fronds, the occasional distant call of night birds, all blend into a symphony of natural tranquility that promotes the most profound and restorative sleep. Feel yourself sinking deeper into this ancient atmosphere of peaceful rest as you absorb the profound quietude that settles over the village. In this pre-industrial world, there are no artificial lights to disrupt natural sleep cycles, no mechanical sounds to interrupt the gentle rhythms of night, no electronic distractions to stimulate minds that should be settling into rest. The darkness itself becomes a gift, a natural invitation to surrender consciousness and allow the body's healing mechanisms to begin their essential work. The ancient Egyptians understood darkness not as something to be feared or fought against, but as a necessary partner in the cycle of life, the counterpoint to daylight activity that makes restoration and renewal possible. As you observe this ancient family settling into sleep, notice how their preparation involves a gradual releasing of the day's concerns and activities. There is no sudden transition from full activity to unconsciousness, but rather a gentle fading of awareness that honors the natural process of moving from waking to sleeping consciousness. The ancient Egyptian approach to sleep was deeply connected to their spiritual understanding of life and death, consciousness and unconsciousness, activity and rest. Sleep was seen as a temporary journey into the realm of the divine, a nightly practice of surrender and trust that prepared the soul for the ultimate surrender that would come at the end of life. This spiritual dimension adds another layer of meaning to their preparation for rest. The simple acts of completing the day's tasks, securing the necessary provisions for survival, and settling into sleep become opportunities for gratitude, surrender, and connection to the eternal rhythms that govern all existence. Let this ancient wisdom about rest and restoration deepen your own relaxation as you prepare to follow their example into the profound peace of natural, unforced sleep. The challenging realities of their daily sustenance, the simple satisfactions of basic needs met, the profound acceptance of life's fundamental conditions, all contribute to a quality of rest that is both deeply physical and genuinely spiritual. In the growing quietude of our ancient village, feel yourself becoming more and more peaceful, more and more ready to surrender to the same natural processes of rest and restoration that sustained countless generations of human beings long before our modern complications and stimulations existed. As our long contemplative journey through the ancient world of Egyptian sustenance reaches its gentle conclusion, allow yourself to sink into the most profound depths of peace and relaxation, following our ancient family into the sacred realm of sleep and dreams that awaits beyond the boundaries of waking consciousness. The village has now settled into complete quietude, with only the most gentle and soothing sounds remaining to mark the transition from day to night. The last cooking fires have burned down to softly glowing embers, casting the faintest warm light on the sleeping areas where families have gathered for the night's rest. The air has reached that perfect temperature of desert evening coolness that makes sleep both possible and deeply restorative after the intense heat of the day. In the courtyard where we have spent our evening observing this ancient family, the mother has settled beside her children with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has successfully completed another day's work of sustaining life. Her breathing has already begun to deepen and slow as her body releases the physical tensions of grinding grain, tending fires, and preparing the simple sustenance that has nourished her family through another cycle of survival. Feel yourself settling into the same deep peace that surrounds this ancient family as they prepare to surrender to sleep. Let your own breathing slow and deepen in harmony with theirs, your own muscles relax more completely as you absorb the profound tranquility that comes from having met life's most basic requirements and finding satisfaction in that simple accomplishment. The father lies nearby, his work-hardened hands finally still after a day of labor in the fields that provide the grain foundation of their diet. His mind, uncluttered by the complex anxieties that characterize modern life, has already begun to release the practical concerns of the day and drift toward the peaceful unconsciousness that will restore his strength for tomorrow's necessary work. The children have succumbed easily to sleep, their young bodies relaxed and trusting, their minds free from the sophisticated worries and stimulations that often prevent modern children from finding natural rest. They sleep the deep, undisturbed sleep of beings whose physical needs have been met and whose emotional security is assured by the presence of loving family members nearby. As you witness this ancient family's descent into sleep, let yourself feel more and more deeply relaxed, more and more ready to follow their example into the restorative realm of dreams and unconscious healing. The simple satisfaction of basic sustenance, the profound acceptance of life's fundamental conditions, the quiet gratitude for survival and security, all contribute to a quality of rest that seems to connect directly to the eternal rhythms that govern all existence. The bread they consumed during their evening meal continues to provide slow, steady nourishment throughout the night, its dense whole grains releasing energy gradually to sustain their bodies during the long hours of sleep. The preserved fish, despite its challenging texture and intense flavors, supplies the protein their muscles need for repair and growth during rest. Even the simple vegetables and basic water contribute to the physiological processes that make deep, restorative sleep possible. In our modern world, we often struggle with sleep because our minds remain stimulated by the day's activities, our bodies are overfed yet undernourished, and our environments are filled with artificial lights and sounds that disrupt natural rhythms. The ancient Egyptians, by contrast, found sleep easily because their lives were aligned with natural cycles, their bodies were genuinely tired from physical labor, and their minds were satisfied by the simple accomplishment of having met their basic needs. Let yourself absorb this ancient wisdom about the conditions that promote truly restorative sleep as you feel your own body and mind settling deeper into relaxation. The challenging realities of ancient Egyptian cuisine, when viewed from the perspective of their natural consequences, reveal themselves as contributors to a way of life that was more aligned with human physiological and psychological needs than our modern abundance might suggest. The darkness that now envelopes our ancient village is complete and natural, unmarked by artificial illumination that might disrupt the body's production of sleep hormones or create stimulation that prevents natural rest. This darkness becomes a gentle blanket that encourages the deepest possible relaxation and the most complete surrender to unconscious healing processes. The sounds of night in ancient Egypt create the perfect background for profound sleep. The distant, constant murmur of the Nile provides a rhythmic foundation that matches the natural rhythms of heartbeat and breathing, while the gentle night sounds of animals and wind create a soothing symphony that masks any disruptive noises without providing stimulation that might prevent rest. Feel yourself sinking deeper and deeper into this ancient atmosphere of perfect peace and natural rest. Let the profound quietude of this pre-industrial world wash over you like a gentle wave, carrying away the stresses and complications of modern life and leaving only the basic satisfaction that comes from having your essential needs met and your security assured. The ancient Egyptians understood sleep not just as a biological necessity but as a spiritual practice, a nightly journey into the realm of the gods where healing, wisdom, and restoration were provided as gifts to those who surrendered completely to the natural process of unconscious rest. Their dreams were seen as messages from the divine realm, their sleep as a temporary reunion with the eternal forces that govern life and death. This spiritual understanding of sleep adds another dimension to the profound peace that settles over our ancient family as they drift deeper into unconsciousness. They surrender not just to biological processes but to cosmic rhythms, not just to physical rest but to spiritual renewal, not just to temporary unconsciousness but to connection with eternal sources of life and wisdom. As you follow their example into deeper and deeper relaxation, let yourself feel connected to these ancient understandings of sleep as sacred time, rest as spiritual practice, and dreams as gifts from divine sources. The simple sustenance they have consumed, the basic satisfaction they have achieved, the fundamental security they have created, all become launching points for the most profound and restorative rest. The breathing of the sleeping family becomes slower and deeper, creating a gentle rhythm that seems to match the eternal pulse of the Nile and the cosmic cycles that govern all existence. Their bodies release completely into the healing embrace of natural sleep, trusting in the processes that will restore their strength and prepare them for another day of survival and simple satisfaction. Let your own breathing join this ancient rhythm of profound rest as you feel yourself sinking deeper into the same peaceful unconsciousness that has restored countless generations of human beings who learned to find contentment within life's basic provisions and satisfaction within fundamental simplicity. In the complete darkness and perfect quietude of this ancient night, feel yourself releasing all connection to the modern world with its complications and stimulations, its abundance and anxieties, its choices and dissatisfactions. Allow yourself to sink into the same deep peace that comes from having met life's most essential requirements and finding that simple accomplishment to be enough. The gentle sounds of ancient sleep surround you now, the slow, deep breathing of people whose bodies are genuinely tired and whose minds are truly at peace, the distant flow of the life-giving Nile, the soft whisper of desert breezes carrying the sense of a world that exists in harmony with natural rhythms and cosmic cycles. Feel yourself becoming one with this ancient peace, this fundamental satisfaction, this profound rest that connects you to the eternal patterns of human existence and the timeless sources of restoration and renewal. Let the challenging realities of ancient Egyptian sustenance transform themselves into wisdom about contentment, acceptance, and the finding of deep satisfaction within life's most basic gifts. As you descend into the sacred realm of sleep and dreams, carry with you the ancient understanding that true wealth consists in having enough, that genuine satisfaction comes from meeting basic needs, and that the deepest peace is found not in abundance but in grateful acceptance of life's fundamental provisions. Sleep now, as countless generations have slept before you, in the perfect peace that comes from understanding your place in the eternal cycles of existence and finding complete satisfaction in the simple miracle of being alive, nourished, and safely at rest in the gentle embrace of ancient wisdom and timeless tranquility. Let the profound quiet of this ancient night carry you into the deepest and most restorative sleep, where your body and spirit can receive the same gifts of healing and renewal that sustained our ancestors through thousands of years of simple living in fundamental satisfaction with life's most basic but precious gifts. Rest now in ancient peace, surrounded by the eternal rhythms that connect all human experience across time and space, carrying with you the wisdom of a people who learned to find profound contentment within the simplest conditions and the most challenging circumstances, transforming survival itself into a sacred practice of gratitude and acceptance.